Sean Strickland has unquestionably established himself as one of the greatest middleweight contenders on the current UFC roster. He'll meet Alex Pereira at UFC 276 next month, but Tarzan has already stated that he has Israel Adesanya on his radar. Apparently there's no actual enmity between Adesanya and Strickland, but that didn't stop Strickland from making a few underhanded comments still. Let's take a look. So first, what did Strickland say? Strickland suggests the idea of Jared Cannonier dethroning Adesanya at UFC 276 in a recent interview with the Schmo. While nothing is set in stone, Strickland decided to liven up things by jokingly taunting the champ for his love of cartoons. He was quoted as saying that Adesanya may be the current champ, but he very well might not be after July 2nd. He then stated that he liked Izzy, and that he's pretty tough apart from the anime, referencing Adesanya's expressive affinity for the Japanese animation form. He then delivered his controversial insult by saying that Adesanya probably gets off to cartoons, and that this is something he holds against him. He then apologized and stated that it needed to be said. The 31-year-old also shared an image of his Instagram story later on with an erotic clip from an anime show. He wrote in the story that it was quite sad that the current UFC champ beats off to this. The American then demanded that the middleweight division needs a better class of champ. Well, what does the champion's corner think about Strickland? There has been no response from Adesanya or his camp to Strickland's recent comments. The champ most likely is keeping his focus on his upcoming bout, but the camp has had opinions on Strickland as a fighter prior to all this, especially considering that a win over Pereira at UFC 276 is likely to catapult Strickland to title contention. Assuming his pupil can defend his belt and Strickland defeats Pereira, Adesanya's coach Eugene Behrman believes Tarzan is ready for a shot at UFC Gold. He said on a radio show interview about the upcoming UFC event that it'd be nice for Strickland to win, as his body and the work he puts in is good enough to have a deserved shot at the title. He then mentioned Strickland's opponent, Alex Pereira, saying that if he wants to aim for the title, he still has more work to do. So that pretty much shows that Izzy's camp has respect for Strickland as a fighter at least. As a person, well, it remains to be seen if they make any replies to the demeaning remarks directed at Adesanya. Then again though, the spectacle of UFC is known for this very banter. This is one of the things that attracts the staggering viewership numbers around the world, and it is this very thing that creates the rivalries and feuds that make UFC more than just a fighting competition, and forges personal rivalries that added to the championship's reputation at the premier fighting championship in the world. And the fighters know this and have therefore developed tough skins for these kind of remarks. Some choose to retaliate in some form, while others choose to let their fighting do the talking. But given that Strickland gets past Pereira and Adesanya defends his title, the possible matchup between the two will truly be a fight to watch, as it will not only be a match of the fighter's skill, but also of a rivalry-fueled match of perspectives on what defines the class of a champion. But all this is merely talk, until the winners are crowned. Ultimately, UFC 276 will be a crucial event for the 185-pound division, as aside from determining whether Adesanya will remain the middleweight champion, we'll also see if Strickland has what it takes to be the next in line. Following that came the press conference. Strickland started off by putting the spotlight on himself from the very start of the UFC 276 press conference by stating that the UFC had been on top of him and asked him to be on his very best behavior. He then continued to make plenty of noise throughout, but it was a question aimed at him about naming the best striker in the middleweight division that really riled up the animosity between the UFC contender and the reigning 185-pound champion, Adesanya. The argument started after Strickland mentioned Adesanya's 2 defeats to his next opponent, Alex Pereira, who defeated the last stylebender in kickboxing, including a devastating knockout in the rematch in 2017. He replied that he'd consider himself the best striker, but since Pereira was the one who knocked out Izzy, he would be next to himself on the scale of the best. He then continued to coax Izzy by asking him about his record against Pereira. That statement riled Adesanya, who shot out at Strickland while reminding everyone in the room that he had Pereira in danger early in the second fight before he was knocked out in the 3rd round. He shouted back asking Strickland whether he had even watched the fight. Strickland's snarky comments aimed at Adesanya didn't stop there though, as he continued insulting him as well as Adesanya's well-documented passion for anime, which only added fuel to the fire. Strickland also casually tossed a homophobic slur into the mix, when he sarcastically stated that he had made the champion with his frosted tips and gay little witch mad. He then continued that he's just joking, but no man who beats off to cartoons is gonna beat him. The back and forth exchange continued, although Adesanya was oftentimes overshadowed by Strickland's booming voice on the microphone. He did state towards Strickland though that he could win his next fight. Izzy would be the one to knock him out, and that he'd then do a TikTok dance over his grave. He then added that Strickland should focus on his guy rather than on the insults towards Adesanya, because if not, Pereira would very well mess him up. Not to be outdone though, Strickland came right back at Adesanya and even addressed the past allegations aimed at the champion over performance-enhancing drug use. Of course, Adesanya was just granted a UFC jacket for 50 straight clean tests under the USA Anti-Doping Agency. During the event, Adesanya even offered a $3 million reward to anyone who could establish that he had ever used illicit drugs. So that comment in particular missed the mark pretty badly. So what did Strickland have to say about his actual opponent? Well, as far as his own fight goes on July 2nd, Strickland did pay homage to Pereira as an incredibly tough opponent, who promised to bring the battle to him with a long list of striking accolades on his resume before he came to the UFC. That seems to remain Strickland's primary focus, even if he still managed to take sideways shots at Adesanya again while addressing his fight with Pereira. He called Pereira a big, scary Brazilian, and that if he came up behind someone someone at an ATM, anyone would be scared out of their wits. He then called him a tough dude before stating that he wasn't worried and could handle him, as he trained with many great kickboxers. Strickland then continued to throw shade at Adesanya, as he said that after he beat Alex, he's gonna become a whole different guy as well. Then he'd start painting his nails and act like a female. He'd wear his sunglasses inside and get himself suits and a nice car. He concluded that he's gonna leave everyone behind and be the best champion of them all. But what does the champ actually have to say about Strickland? Keeping the banter aside though, Izzy said on the press conference day that Strickland could be beat up if he doesn't fight with his ego. He even seems to relate to Strickland to some extent, which he expressed by saying that he likes him and that he's like a stepbrother to him who he's never wanted. He stated that he has a weird sort of respect for him because Strickland speaks his mind just as Izzy does himself. The difference is he states that Strickland does it without thinking of the repercussions, but regardless to Adesanya whether he likes Tarzan's truth or not, he respects him for it and for his freedom of speech, and that's it. But of course the comments of Izzy were far from Tarzan's first controversial comments. Just before June, which is World Pride Month, Strickland was banned from Twitter, where a recent rant from him on the social media app forced its administration to take action and temporarily suspend the middleweight's account. The series of now removed posts from Strickland's drew immediate attention, where he was quoted as stating that he is actually a fan of Pride Month and particularly of the B and LGBT. He then continued rather problematically by saying that he can't stand trans people and they have to be subject to some form of mental. He then followed up with another post where he stated that if someone has male genitalia, removing them won't make them a woman, and even if they grow out their hair and do all the other stuff. He concluded that they would always be an emasculated, mentally ill man. That Twitter ban seems to make at least some sense after hearing all that. Strickland's Twitter remains suspended to this day, although the fighter still regularly posts on his Instagram account and has revealed that he has often been removed from that platform too. And that's a wrap for this video. So who are you vouching for at UFC 276? And do you want a Strickland-Adesanya fight in the future? Do let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and click subscribe button for more videos like this. See you in the next one!